after reports of large-scale missile launches from Iran toward Israel. Military installations across the United States shifted rapidly into a higher state of readiness. Within minutes, alerts spread through multiple branches of the armed forces. Air Force commands, Marine units, and fighter squadrons all received instructions to prepare for potential deployment. Across several bases, the routine rhythm of daily operations was immediately replaced with controlled urgency. Radios crackled with updates. Personnel moved quickly between buildings. Equipment that had been staged for routine drills was suddenly being prepared for real-world operations. On one base, Marine units gathered outside their barracks as buses arrived to transport them to the flight line. The vehicles filled quickly with troops carrying duffel bags and rucksacks. Engines started, and the convoy rolled across the base toward the airfield. When the buses reached the runway area, a large military transport aircraft was already waiting. Its rear cargo ramp was lowered, revealing the white interior of a C-17 Globemaster 3. The aircraft's cargo bay was illuminated by rows of overhead lights, ready to receive both personnel and equipment. Marines stepped off the buses and formed up in small groups while loadmasters coordinated the next phase of the operation. Nearby, forklifts and cargo vehicles moved steadily across the tarmac. Pallets stacked with equipment were brought toward the aircraft. Each load contained essential gear, communication systems, portable power units, medical kits, and crates of supplies. Every pallet was carefully positioned and secured inside the aircraft using heavy straps and locking rails built into the cargo floor. The process was methodical but fast. Inside the cargo hold, Marines found their assigned seating along the sidewalls of the aircraft. They sat shoulder to shoulder, helmets resting on their knees or clipped to their packs. Outside, the loading continued. This flight would not depart immediately. Its route included a brief stop at another installation, where additional troops and equipment would be added before continuing toward the Middle East. At a second military base hundreds of miles away, similar scenes were unfolding. Multiple transport aircraft were lined up on the ramp. Ground crews guided armored vehicles toward the open cargo ramps. Tactical vehicles rumbled forward slowly, climbing the steep metal ramps and disappearing into the cargo bays. Among the vehicles being loaded were light tactical bogies designed for rapid movement, armored trucks used for troop protection, and larger mine-resistant vehicles built to withstand explosive threats. Each vehicle was positioned carefully and chained securely to the aircraft floor. Elsewhere on the base, another critical operation was underway. Inside aircraft hangars and maintenance areas, teams of mechanics worked around rows of fighter jets. These aircraft were being prepared for a demanding schedule of missions that could begin at any moment. Technicians moved from panel to panel, performing detailed inspections. Avionics systems were powered on and tested. Radar arrays were checked to ensure they could track targets accurately. Wiring connections were examined to confirm that every electronic system was functioning properly. Any component that showed even the slightest irregularity was replaced or adjusted immediately. Weapons crews soon joined the maintenance teams on the flight line. Using specialized lifting equipment, they began attaching missiles and guided bombs to the fighter jets. Air-to-air missiles were mounted onto rails at the wingtips. Larger precision-guided munitions were secured under the wings on reinforced pylons. Once mounted, each weapon was connected electronically to the aircraft's targeting systems. Cables were plugged in, data connections verified, and safety pins inserted. Bright red tags hung from the pins, clearly visible against the gray metal of the aircraft. These pins ensured the weapons remained inactive until the moment the aircraft was cleared for takeoff. Meanwhile, away from the flight line, soldiers gathered inside a large hangar where they prepared their personal equipment. Rows of tables were covered with gear, uniforms were folded and packed, boots were placed into duffel bags alongside gloves, protective eyewear, and other field equipment. Hygiene kits and personal items were carefully stored inside rucksacks. The packing process was thorough. For many of the soldiers, this was not a short deployment or a routine training mission. They were preparing to travel overseas with no confirmed timeline for their return. Once the packing was complete, the soldiers waited for further instructions. As the sun began to set, the next order finally arrived. Boarding would begin shortly. Outside the hangar, the soldiers formed organized lines and began marching toward the waiting aircraft. Their boots echoed across the pavement as they approached the flight line. One by one, they climbed the ramps and entered the cargo holds of the transport planes. Inside the aircraft, loadmasters conducted final checks. They reviewed cargo restraints, verified the number of personnel on board, and confirmed that every piece of equipment had been properly secured. With everything in place, the ramp slowly lifted and locked into position. Moments later, the engines of the transport aircraft roared to life. One aircraft after another began taxiing toward the runway. As darkness settled over the base, the planes accelerated down the runway and lifted into the night sky, beginning the long journey toward their destination. Hours later, thousands of miles away, those same aircraft approached air bases in the Middle East. Landing lights illuminated the runway as the heavy transports touched down and rolled to a stop. The cargo ramps lowered almost immediately. Troops stepped onto the tarmac while ground crews moved quickly to begin unloading. Vehicles were unchained and driven down the ramps. Cargo pallets were transferred to waiting forklifts and transported across the base. Everything moved with efficiency and precision. The aircraft that had just delivered the troops would soon prepare to depart again. Their mission was far from finished. Within hours, they would take off once more, returning to the United States to pick up additional personnel and equipment before repeating the journey. For the soldiers who had just arrived, however, the focus shifted to the next phase of the operation. They collected their bags and followed base personnel toward temporary housing and briefing areas. This installation would serve as their new home for as long as the mission required. Back on the airfield, preparations continued through the night. Rows of fighter jets stood ready along the runway apron. Some were parked in the open, while others were positioned inside reinforced shelters designed to protect them from attack. Fuel trucks moved steadily from aircraft to aircraft. Mechanics connected refueling hoses to ports along the fuselage, pumping aviation fuel into the jet's tanks. Gauge panels on the trucks monitored the fuel flow, ensuring the correct amount was delivered to each aircraft. Once a jet was fully fueled, the hose was disconnected and sealed, and the truck moved on to the next aircraft. At the same time, weapons teams continued their work. Missiles and bombs were carefully aligned and secured. Mounting brackets were inspected, release mechanisms tested, and electronic connections verified. Every aircraft went through the same preparation sequence: fuel, weapons, airframe inspections, avionics testing, flight control checks, engine diagnostics. The process repeated again and again until each fighter jet on the ramp had been cleared for operational use. By the time the pilots arrived for their mission briefings, the aircraft waiting for them were fully prepared. Fuel tanks were full, weapon systems were armed and ready, and every jet on that airfield stood ready to launch at a moment's notice as the military buildup in the region continued to grow.